This morning we are having a hearty discussion as we talk about Tobago's contribution. Now, for many persons, there still is the idea or the misconception that Tobago's autonomy should hinge on Tobago's ability to contribute to the national economy, and what percentage of that of the overall economy does Tobago's revenue generation account for. So this morning we are having that conversation, and we are having that conversation with no other than former Assemblyman and former Minority Leader, Mr. Ashworth. Jack, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Ms. Felix, and thank you very much for having me this morning. Good morning, Tobago. Good morning to all those persons who are viewing us on the World Wide Web. I am more than happy to be here this morning so that we can continue the discussion on Tobago's position, and in this case, contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. And I think it all comes back down to, are we positioned to be able to access and to finance ourselves, whether it be through autonomy or any other means of governance.
Excellent. And as I indicated before, there are persons who have the idea that Tobago does not make enough to stand on its own and does not contribute significantly enough to the national economy to want to have a say as it pertains to autonomy. We heard something of that nature by our previous guests that was sitting here and talking about Calypso, and that highlighted how many persons view autonomy and view Tobago and its ability to contribute overall.
In fact, it was interesting to hear in his closing remark, he said, no, there's nothing like autonomy. And it speaks to how uninformed a lot of our citizens are. And of course, Calypso being one of those art forms that has a certain influence and certain sway. It's dangerous when one of the persons who are proponents of the art could openly come up with such an idea enough to so convinced associate. But be that as matters it way, there are people for everything. So I don't know if people have looked at Tobago in the way it should be looked at, because as long as I could remember, this argument have been made against Tobago by some people in Tobago, and I think it's because of laziness. It's laziness that people don't want to do the research. It is laziness that people think it is okay to just sit down and wait on something. And regardless of how much evidence you thrust in the face of some people, their position will remain the same. Right? I am told as a very young man, I was told that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion. So then there are some people, regardless of how much information is available, their will says that, hey, this is what Tobago is. It is our responsibility to work with those people, but it is our greater responsibility to educate younger people so that they understand that they don't have to be seen as mendicants. And this morning I was about to get ready to come to this program, and my mind kept running back to people like Arthur N.R. Robinson, Hochoy Charles, Reggie Dumas, Jeff Davidson, Winston Murray, and the contribution that they would have made. And I'm thinking maybe this island just have to have a Heroes Day and do some education of young Tobagonians as a contribution, because we are fighting the same fight for 50, 60 years, and there are some people who are on the same spot, generations on the same spot, not understanding. I don't know if I would really have liked to jump off this session based on that by, I don't know if Mr. Wood have a copy of the last building blocks, because I would really want to show the building blocks and to show why what we are saying really has no basis in fact and or reality.
Well, I will ask my
And
producer if he can also pull that photograph up of the deep water bidding blocks that are open with 26 blocks up for grabs.
yeah, and while we're waiting
Yeah.
on that to come up, that is so important because Tobago have always been told that we are a dependent. And I'm quite sure you have heard me say this before, Shenell, that if you drive, and you're a country girl, so if you drive into the country in the evening, you will realize that on the any already good old area, and you start anyway from Study Park, when you start looking eastward, you will notice the flares that are burning and stuff like that. And I have always said how far that was away from Trinidad. But we tend to just take everybody else's idea. But the bidding blocks that we have up for grabs in the 2025 round of bidding, it is so glaring that a blind man with a board glasses could see where they are. But I don't know if it is by chance or by design that when the bidding started, when the blocks were put up, yeah, and it's up. When the blocks were put up, it was the same time that there was the issue with Commissioner Christopher. And so everything else got lost in that conversation. And I would just want us to turn our attention to what is on the screen. If you notice, these are the bidding blocks that the government has, the Ministry of Energy have put up for bid in the 2025 season. And if you notice at the upper part of the photo, everything at the upper part of the photo is extremely far from Trinidad. And those are in what is now considered to be, if Tobago is an independent or separate island, that would be in Tobago waters. And then when you look across at my right, I think it will be on your left, you will also recognize that the closeness, the proximity of the largest block to Tobago vis-a-vis to Trinidad. And so if you look at
Block 24.
yeah, I think it's 25. But if you look at all those, what you recognize that what you have out of the 26 blocks, you have 19 of those blocks will be considered to be in the Tobago space. And only 7 of those blocks are considered to be in the Trinidad space, with the largest block comprising of over 2 or 3 of the other big blocks, all in Tobago. What does that mean? And of course, this is not all. These are what are up for bid. They are those blocks that have already been bidded on. Who have people have had those blocks for a while, which is the block 22, and there are 2 of them. But block 22 is already under production, right? And I've been saying that for months. You have never heard any government official, inclusive of our own representative, admit that the block 22 is a producing block. So when people say you don't bring anything, and yet the majority of your new bidding rounds are in Tobago, the potential for your greatest production as it is now on rounds that have already been built on and is coming on for production is off the Castara Partivere area, then you realize that there need to be a more intense education program that tells not only people of Tobago, because it was a couple of weeks ago I was listening to a radio program in Trinidad. I think it was just around the time that the bidding block came out. And one of the radio hosts was saying, but it is said that Tobago have a lot of natural gas and oil. And a couple of persons called into the program and saying, you're talking stupidness, and I don't want to call the host's name. And you were saying, no, we're looking at this thing, and you're saying, but that should be Tobago have no government this. And that is because I think in part, the Tobago's thrust for autonomy have not been centered as much as it should be on our economic contribution to Trinidad and Tobago. And I'll get back to the oil and gas, but there's also the situation where, because of Trinidad's location, Trinidad is actually blocked in by Tobago, Venezuela, Grenada. So they're not that far. But Tobago, on the other hand, has Trinidad as a neighbor. It has Barbados as a neighbor, which is a lot further afield. And then outside of that, we go all the way out to the African Ocean, which is Tobago brings to that in that area the 200 miles permissible by law of exclusive economic zone, and that is why we fish in. That is what a number of things take place in, and because people don't understand that, they think that Tobago is just the 116 square miles. I've said this before, and I want to repeat it: that countries are no longer determined by their land space. But countries are determined by their land space and the amount of waters around them that they either share with neighbors 50-50, or in the case of if you have extensive bodies of water, the exclusive economic zone is 200 miles, and then out of that is international waters.
So I had a conversation some time ago with the representative, the MP for Tobago West, Shamfa Kicho Lewis, and she indicated that it would not be wise for Tobago to seek the profits from what is in Tobago waters, because that will then hinder Tobago from being able to benefit from what is in the waters that may be considered Trinidad waters. Now, she did highlight the NGC map for Trinidad and Tobago, the energy map, and I am going to try to also get my producer to put that one up as well as I send that over to him. But what she was indicating is that though there is gas finds in the Tobago waters, there are no oil finds in the Tobago
that is not
waters.
True.
So, well, based on the NGC map and how they have color coded it, they have color coded red for gasoline and green for oil.
Okay, I'm quite sure
and
when you put up
I will allow them to put it up.
the map, you recognize the difference. Because and it's interesting that this is the same argument I have been hearing since I was a child, and it seems as though that organization seemed to be making the same argument against Tobago seeking any form of economic independence. And I don't know if it's a brainwashing. I don't know if it's orientation. I don't know what it is. But it seems as though every one of their representatives have given up an independent thought to just parrot the speaking points of the organization. Right? And I don't know when, even in these gas finds, you hear how they are described? 50 miles southeast of Trinidad. Why don't you Trinidad and Tobago to 22 miles apart? So 50 miles southeast is way into Tobago.
Right.
You know? So I have heard the non-argument. I have heard I call it an excuse. And I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all, based on what we know and what we are seeing. At first, we didn't have. I know they're showing up, Bob said don't have. And now they're saying, okay, you have gas, but not oil. So don't worry about having gas. But we have known for the longest while that Tobago is sitting on a bed of gas and oil. And the evidence is there to show. Well, now you're seeing it clearer than ever, with some of the gas fields expected to yield more than 3 trillion cubic meters of gas.
And the map is presented
Right.
here. So we see on the Tobago end, where it's in red, that has to do with the gasoline finds. And they are saying that where there's green, and you look at Trinidad, and you see a number of both red and green, That's where
And
the
and no
oil.
one is not saying that because and the point 14 area is further away from Tobago. But there, if you look at the size of the blocks outside the real outside of Tobago, you reckon the size of it. And therefore, no one has said what is the expected yield or what have been drawn from those. So it's not that Tobago to have 10 gas fields, but you're telling me that Tobago doesn't contribute. And I'm saying, listen, apart from just the oil and gas, and because I heard the same minister made a argument, I had sent it on another station. I showed what they were saying before 2013 and how diametrically opposed those two thoughts were in 2024. Where she was saying that, yes, you have oil and gas, but do you have the money to monetize it? I mean, it's like, huh? And I still have it on my phone. I would never get rid of it because it wasn't making sense to me. And I'm saying, we were saying the same thing about Guyana.
Exactly, right.
Suriname,
Yeah.
Brazil.
But then you had a number of international investors coming in and providing the resources needed
Exactly.
to go in.
Wherever there is need for resources, there will be investors because investors know I will make money from this. So here we have, in one bid, 19 blocks for bid. And you're telling me Tobago would not profit anything from that? And it's not that we shouldn't, and we're not asking to take all the money from these blocks. So we're saying we must have a profit sharing arrangement.
Or at least understand what the yield
what it
would
brings,
be like.
yeah.
Right. And do you think that this is something that the chief secretaries should be championing and a conversation that
every time we go in,
that should
every time
be
we're going to have a right.
prominent in the public space?
Because one of the problems that I think that we in this part of the world tend to have is that we put so much responsibility on an individual.
Right.
And governments and stuff rise, and political organization rises and falls on those individuals. I mean, I think there's a guy, an American philosopher guy, his name is Dr. Omar. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I follow him a lot I was looking at something that he was saying. And it's a fact that one of the things that we have not done as a people is to create leaders. We have big leaders and then they die. And there are another 30 years or so, or 50 years in some cases, before another set of leaders come. And that's because we don't set about training leaders. Because there's a crisis of confidence in our societies that says, I am afraid of competence. If people are too competent, then somebody figure they are a threat. They're not a threat. They're an aid. And so I think that what we need to be doing now is that we need to be educating Tobagonians on exactly what it brings to the national economy, how it brings that. And it is not that you're trying to move away from Trinidad. What you're trying to say is that you have as much right as the child in Trinidad to the resources of this country. People ask me, tell me, say, but Jack, all of me talking about, because I have a lot of friends in Trinidad. I have a lot of people that I have very, very intense discussions with. And some of them are as lost as a number of the people in Tobago. Because remember, it is like slavery. We were taught that Africa started in the 1619 project around there. Around 1619, it seemed that but nobody taught them that before that, some of the biggest kingdoms and stuff was found in Africa, in the Nigerian area, a number of those things. That's another conversation for another day. But we are seeing where Tobago is deliberately kept in a certain place so that you seem to be dependent. And let me just give you a couple of examples. The law says, Act number 40, that every business operating in Tobago must pay their taxes in Tobago. Up to now, that is not done. Even the government offices that operate in Tobago, T&Tech, TSTT, all those, the VATs and all that. The money is put in a bag, sent down to Trinidad. And the VAT and all the other taxes are not accredited to Tobago. When MP brings its stuff and the VAT and stuff in Tobago, that is not accredited to the Tobago economy. All the persons who work in those areas that I just spoke about, their income tax is calculated in Trinidad. But they have to use the roads in Tobago, they have to get water, all the stuff that taxes help to put together have to be done for them in Tobago. But even their income taxes and stuff like that is paid in Trinidad. The majority of goods, imported goods that come to Tobago, comes through Trinidad ports. And the custom duties and all that have to be paid in Trinidad. So what Tobago collect is not a true reflection of Tobago's contribution.
Understood. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back right here after this. So see you soon, guys.
Greetings, everyone. I am Miss Kersha Kenter.
Rise up to a brand new dawning as the passion start to rise. The energy fill the skies.
Good morning, and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. This morning we have been talking with Mr. Ashworth Jack, former assemblyman and minority leader, and we have been chatting about Tobago's contribution to the national economy. Now, when these conversations are had, there are a number of persons who think that the agenda is to be divisive, to say Tobagonians over here, Trinidadians over there. But how important is collaboration and relationship building to empowering Tobagonians and, Tobago businesses to understand its national contribution?
I am in the unenviable position of not being able to discriminate against Trinidad. And let me explain that. 50% of my children are born in Trinidad. And about 60% of my siblings were born in Trinidad and migrated back to Trinidad to live when they became adults. And the majority of my first cousins at a number of very senior positions in Trinidad. And their grandfathers and their fathers are Tobagonians, which are my uncles and stuff like that. So the issue of me being anti-Trinidad cannot arise. I am pro-Tobago though, because I live here. I live here by choice. I have a million opportunities to live here, but I live here by choice. And I have said, and I'm saying to people, listen, Trinidad will benefit if Tobago is developed. And let me just give you probably one or two examples. We have been trying to get license to export from Study Park. It means that once we get that license, we'll be able to borrow money to buy the equipment that we need and stuff like that. If that happens, with Guyana expanding at the rate that it is, that buying material out of St. Lucia, Cuba, a number of our Caribbean neighbors, yet we are said to have the best aggregate material in this part of the world. But we can't enter into negotiations because, one, you have to get an export license that comes out of Trinidad. And if you want to borrow the kind of money that is necessary to upgrade the system, the easiest thing is to show a license, show the financial institution that you'll be able to pay back your loan easily. But it is not just Tobago, because Tobago has a foreign exchange crunch. And so if those things are in place, then Guyana will purchase from us, and they have been coming every day, asking for hundreds of thousands and millions of tons of aggregate. And then you'll be able to satisfy maybe, if not all of, but the majority of Tobago foreign exchange needs. And then you have another situation where anyone that you touch base with that have heard about Tobago speaks about the beauty of Tobago and the serenity and stuff like that. And yet the amount of money that is allocated for Tobago to do tourism-related stuff, especially promotion of Tobago, is about what, 41 million TT dollars. And that has to pay staff and do all the promotion. Just the promotion budget for Barbados alone is in the vicinity of 80 to 90 million US dollars. We are talking about Tobago's promotion about between 6 and 6.5 million US. How do you compete with Caribbean islands that are spending minimum 40 and 50 million US? All the way up to 100, in the case of Jamaica, more than 100 million US dollars per annum on promotion. But when you say these things, people don't understand that one thing will feed off the other. Because if Tobago has enough foreign exchange, then Trinidad will also benefit from the foreign. In any case, it's your banks. So they put the money in the bank in Tobago, you know the majority of it will be sent to Trinidad. As far as the boss say, we need some foreign exchange, it will go. But Tobago, if properly funded, could become a major contributor to the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. And what we are saying is that now that it is clear to see what Tobago can bring to the national economy, Tobago should be given an opportunity to do that. And for example, Tobago could borrow a maximum of $300 million with the approval of the Minister of Finance. It means that you really can't borrow nothing. Because if the minister says no, then the answer is no.
Okay.
What is the limit to Trinidad borrowing? But yet, Trinidad have 96% of the budget.
Right. And I want you to explain to us, we saw a headline last week about a bolt being placed against the THA that if they would
at the Privy Council.
Yes, this decision was made in regards to Tobago needing approval to do projects above a certain amount. Can you explain that to us?
Here we go again, which is really a jump off from what I just said.
Right.
It means that I think Tobago had, at the beginning of this administration, there was some talk about the $300 million window being almost totally utilized. I think there's just a couple $1 million was left because the last administration had used up all that. It means that don't care what Tobago wants to do. I know there was a talk about the Scarborough project and all that, but once the government have to go into an arrangement with anyone, even if they want to bring the money, it means that they have to have the approval of the minister in Trinidad in order to do that. Where does that leave Tobago? And let me tell you how bad it is. And I'm not free to call the bank name. We have been trying to, at Study Park, to get a company credit card from FCB for years. And they say, no, the Minister of Finance have to write a letter, a no objection letter. And I said, but no, the money from Study Park is a company. And Study Park pays its own bills. And they say, no, the minister. But we know that there are two funds. The THA Act sets up a Tobago House of Assembly Fund, and the Constitution sets up the Consolidated Fund. All the monies appropriated by Parliament goes into the Tobago House of Assembly Fund, and therefore you don't have to ask the Minister of Finance in Trinidad to, if you tell me the secretary have to sign for the bank, for the credit card in Tobago, I could understand. But to tell me that you have a Tobago House of Assembly Fund, and that is, I don't think even the banks are bringing themselves up to scratch in terms of what the law says. And that is why, and I mean, I see it, I'm going on, I'm hearing people talk about it. People talk about money going back to Trinidad. And that is not so. The Tobago House of Assembly Act says money appropriated by Parliament shall be paid into the Tobago House of Assembly Fund. Money unexpended at the end of the financial year shall remain in the fund and be used in the following year for capital expenditure. And that is why you will hear the talk about unexpended balance. I mean, I am not a fond of unexpended balance. I believe that if I tell you I want $3 billion and you give me $2, at the end of the year, I shouldn't have a cent because you underfund me anyway. If I have to make an argument the next year for more money, I have to show that I could have spent all the money that you gave me. And so this thing about Tobago having to run to try and cap in hand every day, and I think what it does, it puts the Secretary of Finance and the Chief Secretaries in Tobago, all of them, in a very unfortunate position where they try to hold back some money and cut back even on the limited amount that they can do, because they don't know exactly what will happen in the next year. And there might be some projects that they have projected for the next year. So they try to hold back some money in order to be able to have money to spend on those projects. And then what that Privy Council ruling, and of course we knew it all the time, but the Privy Council just put paid to it. It clearly says that if you don't have the money, then if try and tell you no, it's no. So Tobago's development will always be stymied, and that is why the issue of Tobago sharing in the revenue for our gas and oil becomes so important that Tobago could have a real savings, just like there is a consolidated fund. It is my humble opinion that, not the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, sorry, not the Consolidated Fund. It is my humble opinion, if Tobago is entitled to 4% or 6% or 8% of the national budget, once there is a crisis in Tobago, Tobago should be able also to draw down from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund to the maximum of the percentage that is agreed upon. But it is now you can't.
And when it has to do with international investors investing in Trinidad and Tobago, particularly in Tobago, let's say these are charitable organizations like UNESCO and all of these international funding agencies that fund development in developing countries. Is it that the bold agreement requires that if they are to inject,
I think there's no objection. Yeah, the charter must have no objection.
1 billion into the Tobago economy, that requires approval from the Ministry of Finance?
Yeah, there's no objection from the ministry. You know, it is like, I think it's the IADB had an arrangement with Trinidad and Tobago for the home construction. And I think part of the thing was that they would not construct homes in Trinidad without Tobago being included. I know for a fact that the construction of homes in Trinidad started. Everything was done in Tobago. I think it was NIPDEC that was the project manager. And NIPDEC did all that they were required to do. But the government never accessed the Tobago part of the IADB loan. So yes, the houses in Trinidad have been constructed. In fact, it's like if you outsmart the IADB, you say, yeah, we sign for both of them. But in terms of when it's time to access the Tobago aspect of it, the government just have not accessed it. And so Tobago, that should have been having, I think about 200 and something homes constructed, because the government did not access the part of the funding for the Tobago House of Assembly. Tobago House of Assembly have not been able to start any of those, and now have to go into a different arrangement in order to try to satisfy the housing needs in Tobago. I mean, and that can't be fair. Because if you tell me we can't borrow, IADB say, look, we're willing to fund you, yet you have to sign off, and you still didn't sign off. And now you're saying, listen, if you want to get anything, any bolt arrangement, come to us. We have to sign off on this. And if the government decide I'm not doing it, then Tobago just suffers. And yet there is nothing that any administration or individual in Tobago could do. If the government get up in the morning and say, we want to borrow $700 million, they could just borrow it and spend all in Trinidad.
Understood. And finally, as we wind down our discussion this morning, we saw a headline that came up in the media, I believe it was a day ago. Or a couple of days ago, on the Newsday, that indicated, it said, the headline said, Kamala coalition with TPP after election possible. And then when you read the article, it says that Prasad Bisesa said that the TPP is not part of the coalition of interest the UNC is trying to build for the election. She reiterated that the UNC will not field candidates in Tobago and let Tobagonians vote for their parties. Now, Why do you think that these type of headlines are being circulated right now?
But of course, we know that the issue of election is coming, and there's a attempt, and they have successfully done it in 2013, to tell people that the Indian people go take over. I'm quite sure everybody in Tobago remember that campaign, that the Calcutta ship was coming. And this is just saying the Calcutta should come in a different way. And it makes me wonder about the impartiality of the news medias, right? And so that if you hear people when they go to people's homes, on the media, they might say one thing, but when they go to people's home, they tell you, well, them Indian go do this and them Indian go do that. And it's a horrible race game play to instill fear. And that is when you don't have anything to bring to the table. When you hear people only talking race, it means that is all they have. They can't come up with ideas and projects and proposals as to how we'll move this place forward. You know, I have heard it said, I think it's an African writer who spoke about elections. And he said, an election should be a competition of ideas. But what you see in this part, and in Tobago in particular, is a competition of colors. It has nothing to do with people sitting down and coming up with ideas and say, this is the best ideas, how you're going to fix this, and educating people on how you're going to fix them. As a result of that, we have a larger a number of persons dependent on the state for even jobs, because you're not able to attract enough private sector investment. And of course, we know some of these jobs are very low paying jobs. And whereas if you have private sector investment, you'll be able to have jobs that are paying a lot better because private sector is about profit. And so this idea of competition of colors, we need to replace it with the competition of ideas. Let people come to the table with ideas as to how they can fix Tobago. Let them come to the table with ideas as to how we can get successive governments and future governments to be able to give Tobago even what Act number 40 says, and give Tobago its just due in terms of a separation of powers in Trinidad vis-a-vis Tobago. We call it the autonomy bill. Because you can't have one set of people saying one part of Tobagonian being told, you know, if you support this autonomy thing, then you're betraying your party. And it tells me that people see the party bigger than the island. And for me, that is so unacceptable. Tobago, in the context of the Caribbean, Tobago is a big island. What, Barbados 166 square miles? Grenada 134. St. Kitts and Nevis put together 71. Tobago is 116. In the context of the Caribbean, Tobago is large and should be treated as such. We're not a stepchild, we're not a mendicant that comes cap in hand begging.
Understood. Well, we want to thank you so much for your time this morning. Unfortunately, we are out of time. But guys, we want to thank you so much for joining us for this morning's conversation. We want to thank you for your likes, your shares, and your comments, and all that you have been doing to make Tobago Updates the #1 broadcaster right here on the island of Tobago. Again, I am Shenell Felix, and hopefully I see you again tomorrow. Have a great day.
A brand new dawning as the passion start to rise.